What's going on, guys? In this video we're going to take a look at the interest-based targeting in the Facebook Ads Manager. Yesterday we took a look at demographic targeting, and I include in demographic targeting these location, age, gender, language, because I think that's technically demographics, and then as well as that I would include the demographics section here, obviously. So what we want to look at today is the interests section here. And you can definitely browse through this and find a lot of stuff, but you can also search and find a ton of other stuff as well. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to start by going through the basics, and once we do that, I'll talk a little bit about strategy and a couple of examples where I've used interest-based targeting. Okay, so first of all, if you're not familiar with this at all, if you're brand new, first of all, hello. Second of all, basically what you're trying to do here is you're going to try to pick some topics that people are interested in, and then you're going to try to show ads to those people who like that topic. So for example, yesterday I mentioned Rolex, as a brand. So you can target brands, you can target topics, watches, and you can see here if we click watch, well, it's always going to tell you up here some huge number unless you turn off this checkbox right here. So there's the debate is still out about whether it's good or not to use this. So I plan to do some testing and I'll report back my results. But for now, I typically leave it off so that I can see actually the number of people I'm targeting. But anyway, so you can basically just search for anything. You can't find everything in the world, but you can find a lot of stuff. So really, interest-based targeting boils down to essentially two things, in my opinion: creativity and then testing. So you really have to, if you're just trying to learn this, you probably already have some reason that you're trying to learn this, and maybe you have a product you're trying to sell or something like that. So, I mean, the first line of attack is always going to be find a product similar to what you're trying to sell, or a brand that sells something similar, and just try to target their audience. So let's say that you're selling, organic cosmetics or something. Well, you might want to try to target Lush Cosmetics. Um, and then you can click down here in the suggestions, and it'll recommend, other things you could potentially target. So the question is, how do you know what you should target, and how do what level of specificity is enough? A lot of people will point out the audience size up here. That can be relevant, but it's typically, as long as you have a decent amount of people, I don't worry about that as much. Um, so, I mean, this is where I think the creativity comes in. So let's go back to our cosmetics example. So you're launching a cosmetic product. I think what you have to know when you're launching anything is what is the unique selling proposition that you have. So let's say that you wanted to target people who like cosmetics. That's going to be an enormous amount of people. And I think this is why people point this out, is because they're going 110 million people, like that's too many. It's really not that it's too many people, it's that your targeting is not specific enough. Because saying I want to target people who like cosmetics, there's going to be people who like Lush, who like, I'm acting like I'm an expert at this, but there's going to be people who like all sorts of different brands. And there's a lot of reasons people like those different brands, and they're going to be quite a bit varying. And so what you need to do is figure out, okay, well, the unique aspect of mine is that it's organic, or it's a luxury item, or it's this. And then you're going to find things that are the most similar and target those. So then on the other end of the spectrum, you could do something like this. You could say, okay, I want to target people who like cosmetics, and I want to target people who like Lush, and I want to target people who like, I don't know, labradoodles. Is that a thing? Apparently there's 16,000 people who like labradoodles in all caps. There's a million people who like labradoodle. So now we're down to 140,000 people. And this could be interesting if you're selling organic cosmetic products that feature labradoodles on the packaging or something like that. I mean, who knows? Um, but generally, I think that you could keep going further and further and further until you have, like, just a couple of people that might be interested in your product. And you don't really want to stack up interests like this beyond what makes sense for your product. Again, like if you are actually selling organic cosmetics that have labradoodles on the packaging, maybe this makes perfect sense. But otherwise, I think you'd probably back it out to this level potentially. Um, but yeah, so I mean, you can go crazy, but don't go too crazy. So let's talk about a little bit more difficult scenarios, and I'll walk you through some real world examples that I have dealt with and am dealing with. So this is sort of a softball thing here, right? That we're looking at. We're saying, oh, let's target organic cosmetics, and then there happens to be a brand that sells that, and so we're immediately just jumping into that. And if you're in that situation, that's great. But a lot of people find themselves in more difficult situations. Let's say that you're selling a drop shipping type product, or which I don't think is as trendy now as it used to be, maybe, but or you're importing something or whatever. So we had a business where we were importing mechanical watches from China, and it actually was profitable. We shut it down because it was quite time consuming and quite tedious, and we have other businesses that were making more money. So we decided to just put it on pause until we had time to kind of like look back into it. But selling those was a bit challenging. So what we did to get things off the ground is we actually started by creating 3 different personas. Now, if you don't know what a persona is, just go on Google and look up, business persona or customer persona or something like that, and you'll find tons and tons and tons of resources. We'll probably make a video about making personas pretty soon or something. So our first persona that we came up with was a kind of young-ish business professional, potentially living in a city, who wanted to look sharp for work, something like that, something that kind of stands out. And that's based on, what we thought the style of the watches kind of represented. And I think this one was probably the most misguided, but that's fine. We're just hypothesizing. So the second one we came up with was people who like high-end watch brands but don't want to shell out thousands of dollars. And so these watches are mechanical, like high-end watches. The designs are inspired by some of the more expensive watches. We weren't selling fakes or counterfeits or anything, but they definitely took a lot of inspiration from some fancier brands, I would say. And these watches were just generic. There was no logos or anything like that. So we kind of said, okay, well, yeah, you can buy this generic watch for, a fraction of the price of the expensive watch. And then the third persona was, we're thinking more about maybe a little bit older guys who, not old, but a little bit older, who are into sort of the more mechanical. This is a little bit harder to pin down as far as a persona goes, but I'm thinking about people who, they like to work with their hands. They're like, industrious type guys. That was sort of our third persona. So how do we go about targeting this? So the first one, first of all, what we did, we said, okay, let's just start by putting watches, which gets you a pretty big audience. And then let's narrow that. So right now we're talking about the business professional. So what we did is we said, okay, let's say watches, and then Hugo Boss maybe is an interest that might make sense. So we said, okay, 2.1 million people, that's a good amount of people, so let's do that. And then we did the same for a few other brands like Banana Republic. Essentially brands that represent people who are professional. They're going to go to work. These are Hugo Boss is probably a little. Well, it's not probably. It's definitely more higher in the Banana Republic. So, but what we did is we found a bunch of brands that kind of fit this category. Where if you like watches, you're a guy, and that's the other thing. We filtered by men. So now you really drop the audience down. So we built up several different audiences that we thought might fit this persona, and then we ran ads that had language in them that was sort of like, about, wanting to look sharp at work or something like that. And that one didn't work out so well. We did make some sales, but it wasn't really profitable. The second one, which is, saying just go straight after people who like high-end brands. Let's say you want to sell a product that let's say, has the inspiration from a particular brand, but you're selling to people who may not want to pay that kind of price. So you could say like IWC, for example, is a really famous watch company and 470,000 people. So we would run ads targeting people who like IWC. Now this one was interesting because we did make some sales, but we also got a lot of backlash because it turns out if you spent $5,000 or $10,000 on a watch and you see an ad for something that looks similar to your watch for $200, you freak out a little bit and like say it's a counterfeit. Now it's not. It's legal. Everything's fine about it, but it really pissed some people off. So I don't know. Maybe if you're comfortable with that, this would have actually been the best approach because it was getting a lot of attention, but I didn't want to get sued, so we shut this one down. The third one, which worked out the best, was essentially similar to the first one in terms of the strategy, but we were trying to find these people who were a little bit more industrious, as I said, and that's not the right word. I don't actually know the right adjective, but I have the picture in my head of this person. So we would set up like people who like watches and people who like Eddie Bauer, for example. And that is, oh, not the employer. It's like 1,000 people. That doesn't make any sense. And yeah, you have to get the interest here. So that's not a lot of people. We had a couple of other brands that sort of fit into this category. I don't remember exactly which one, maybe Patagonia and so on. But what we ended up finding out is that this one worked the best. And we were selling a lot of watches to people who live in small towns around the country. Um, and that actually really surprised me. So if I was doing this, all again, or if I was explaining it to you exactly how to set it up, what you would essentially do is create these personas and then create, ad sets for each persona, and then just see which ad set wins out. Um, when you're doing all of this, now that I know more, you definitely need to go back and look at the audience overlaps and that sort of thing. So we have that video that we just posted a couple days ago about audience overlaps if you want to check that out. But yeah, this is a great way to test and find what audiences are going to work the best. Now, eventually, once we started making sales, we switched to a lookalike audience, and that actually took us to the next level where we went from like being kind of profitable to being pretty profitable. Um, so yeah, that's really how you start making real money is once you start getting traction and switch to the lookalikes. Um, so let's see. I guess this video is getting a little bit long already, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. The only other thing I wanted to say is in the last video, we talked about the demographic targeting and when to use that, and then versus when to use interest. Well, actually, we didn't talk about interest based in the last one, so we just talked about when to use demographic. Um, I would just wanted to point out, the best time to use interest based really is when you're selling a product or when you're selling some kind of service that's absolutely not location dependent. And the reason that that matters is because if you think about the last video, let's say you're trying to sell legal services or something like that, you know, it's very hard to target people who are interested in something related to legal services, because people are going to need legal services for a whole bunch of different reasons. What the caveat to that is, let's say that somebody's selling a very specific kind of legal services, like they sell, uh, legal advice to people who run startups or small businesses or something like that. Now, that is something that would be more interest based, potentially, and it would also make sense if that client or that legal professional was willing to work outside of a particular area. So, if you're just working in like Miami or something, it probably, you could layer with interest because Miami is so big. So you could definitely do like, target a 20-mile area around Miami and then layer on top of that something like you're interested in entrepreneurship and startups or something like that. And that would be probably a pretty good targeting. Um, but ultimately, I think that if you're selling something that's really local, you just want to stick with the location based stuff, just because you need to basically canvas the area. Um, Interest based, you really want to find something where people have something in common, and that's hard to do for certain things. Like, I don't know how, off the top of my head, an immigration attorney would do this, for example. I mean, you could probably think of some things, but if you're dealing with a particular population in a particular area, you just probably want to stick with the demographics. All right, that's it for this video. I appreciate you watching. If you like this, please subscribe to the channel, click the like button, leave a comment. I'll always try to reply to all the comments. But yeah, that's it for this one, so I will talk to you in the next one.